I've got 4 more problems, and these are probably the hardest of all because there's not one correct way to do them. There's a whole bunch of ways. So hopefully you and I get the same answer. So let's look at the first one. Probably what I would do on the first one is I would try to factor 12, and I would try to factor 15 to see if anything simplifies before I have to rationalize the denominator. So I'm going to break 12 into 3 times 4. And what I'm doing is trying to pick factors that would simplify. This would be 3 times 5. So I notice that I have a 3 under the radical on top and a 3 under the radical on bottom. So those are going to cancel out because that's like having a big one, something over itself. So then I know that the square root of 4 is 2. So here's what I've got so far. 2 over the square root of 5. But we know this kind of goes against some of the rules of math. You can't have a radical in the denominator, so we're going to need to rationalize by multiplying by the big one. And in this case, I'm going to choose the 1 to be the square root of 5 over 5. So in the numerator, I get 2 square root 5. And in the denominator, I get square root 25, which is just 5. Okay, let's look at the next one. I'm going to break apart 45 on the top and 32 on the bottom. 45 is 9 times 5, and I'm actually going to leave both of those numbers because 9 is a perfect square and 5 is a prime number. 32 I'm going to break apart. That is 2 and 16. And 16 is a perfect square, so I'm going to keep it. So here's what I've got. Square root of 9 brings a 3 to the front. Square root of 16 brings a 4 to the front. So I've got 3 square root 5 over 4 square root 2. So the problem with this answer, you can't have a radical in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply by the big one. And I want to choose wisely on the 1. Now, notice on the bottom I have a 4 times 2. The 4 is not a problem. The only thing that's the issue is the square root of 2. So when I multiply by the big one here, I only need to do the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. So on the top, I get 3 square root 10. And on the bottom, just this part goes to 2 because it's the square root of 4. So I have 2 times 4, which is 8. So this is my answer because 3 and 8 doesn't reduce. Why don't you try the next one and then pause the video and check your work. Okay, let's see if we did this the same. This is negative, and on top I'm going to factor 24, and on the bottom I'd factor 11, but it doesn't factor. So on the top I'm going to pick, I would probably pick 3 times 8. 3 is a prime number, but 8 isn't. 8 is 2 times 4. And I know that the square root of 4 is 2. Notice where I put the 2. I put it between the negative sign and the radical. Because when you multiply these, this makes sense. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. But if you put the 2 here, it looks like 2 subtract this. And I want it to be multiplied. So here's what I've got. Negative 2 square root. Whoop, I didn't see. I've got 3 and a 2. So I'm going to multiply those back together and make a 6. And then on the bottom, square root of 11. So then I'm going to multiply by the big one, which is going to be the square root of 11 over the square root of 11. So I get negative 2 square root 66 over 11. Last one. Square root of 40. I would choose 4 and 10, and then I would change 10 to 2 and 5. On the bottom, I have square root of 169, and that is 13 times 13. So on the bottom, these two 13s cancel out and give me a 13 on the outside. And the square root of 4 is 2. So I have 2 square root 10 on top and 13 on bottom. Now, when you're working your homework today, don't get frustrated. These are hard problems, and they're hard for people seated in class. we'll keep working on them, so I'm sure they're going to be hard for online too, but don't get discouraged, and if you need help, come in and see me.